Now, the Transnet Freight Rail appears to be improving its rail capacity along a number of routes. The state rail company has just completed the Mamatwane crossing loop in the Northern Cape ahead of schedule. Transnet has in the past been criticized for neglecting routes to the country's ports. Joining us now is Bonginkosi Mabaso, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at the Transnet Freight Rail. Bonginkosi, thank you for making time for us this afternoon. What does this completion of the construction of the Mamatwane crossing loop mean for the Transnet Freight Rail?
Good afternoon, Clement, and thanks for the opportunity. The completion of the crossing loop means that we will now be able to activate some of the projects that we had on the pipeline that will enable capacity growth for manganese that were bottlenecked by the section of the rail network between Hotazel and Sishen, which was constrained on the basis of all the slots being occupied. I must add also, we are excited, extremely so, that we've been able to deliver this project 30 days ahead of time. It was initially envisaged for completion at the end of the month of July into August. We've been able to deliver this early in the month of July, and it will really enable us then to activate some of the projects, including the activation of manganese that will be exported via the port of East London.
So what's going to be the impact on the freight sector and just broadly our economy?
So particularly for the manganese industry, if I start there, we will now be able to, as I've indicated, activate a new route through the port of East London for export of manganese. Overall, the enablement of the Mamatwane loop will unlock 1.5 million tons of export capacity that would have otherwise been on road. Yeah. What that means is we will be removing about 45,000 trucks per year, truck loads that would have moved on our South African roads that will now be moving via rail. Secondly, we will now be also activating the port of East London, which as it stands now has not handled manganese since inception. And that would also have a spin-off economically in the region and in the Eastern Cape, but particularly for the city in East London.
Okay, so the capacity added by the loop extension, this potential 1.5 million tons per annum, is going to benefit the exporters. What about Transnet itself? Will this added volumes also generate additional revenue for the company?
Absolutely, absolutely. So with the additional 1.5 million tons that we've unlocked through the extension of the loop, we will, of course, be earning quite a significant revenue. But most importantly, it also presents an opportunity for the economy of the country to earn some 4.4 billion rands in foreign earnings from the exports that will be realized, which will, of course, go to the pockets of the mining sector and ultimately pass on to the fiscus as well. So there really will be an impact in the economy.
Speaking of the mining sector, the Minerals Council recently said that the country lost out on about 50 billion rand in potential revenue through ore exports just last year due to your inability as TFR to meet demand by transporting bulk freight to ports like Richards Bay. What work are you doing to fix that? Because that's a lot of money we are potentially losing.
So, Clement, first of all, we've always been clear and we've been calling upon all the stakeholders to come to the party to resolve the challenges at hand. Because the challenges at hand, if I were to be frank in this conversation, are not particular to Transnet. First of all, if you look at the issue of cable theft, which is a key limitation insofar as our ability to move volumes. In the previous year, 2021-22, we lost about 1,600 kilometers of overhead traction equipment through theft and vandalism. The following year, we lost 1,100 kilometers of the same. So cable theft and vandalism alone accounts for a significant loss in what the mining industry would have exported. Of course, it impacts us as well in terms of revenue. In addition to that, and that's why we are calling for a partnership all the way from government to private sector in curbing this, because the issue of theft and vandalism is criminal in nature, and therefore cannot be left at the footsteps of Transnet alone. It's a countrywide issue that needs to be addressed. In addition to that, of course, there's an issue of locomotives that we do not currently have spares for, owing to an impasse between ourselves and CRRC, one of our locomotive suppliers, due to matters relating to state capture, where they were implicated, where the resolution was that they will not continue to supply us as a country. Of course, without locomotives, which are an integral tool of trade for us as Transnet, we are unable to then deliver the volumes that we intended to. Of course, we've called upon all stakeholders, including government, to intervene in that conversation in order for us to get the locomotives back. Apologies, I'm going to give you a bit more stats here so that you really get clarity in this picture. In our best performing year, 2017-18, we had 2,200 locomotives active in our system. To date, we sit with 1,500 locomotives. You can imagine the impact that it has. Of course, without the locomotives, we are unable to move the volumes that we would have ordinarily moved. So what we are doing around that, because we can't sit back and say without the OEM we are unable to move volumes, what we are doing is we've engaged other OEMs that supply us with locos as well, to say, come to the party, assist us in bringing back locomotives. And of course, we've started seeing some of these long-standing locomotives that were out of commission coming back into production. Starting from the month of April, we've seen quite a big injection of them coming back. But without the resolution of the Chinese impasse, it remains an issue, because they sit with the biggest number insofar as the supply of the locomotives and the spares.
When are you...
So with those...
sorry, you can continue that point, Bonginkosi. I also wanted to find out when you think you'll get to that capacity of 2,200.
We seem to be missing each other there, Clement.
Yeah, I was asking, when do you think you'll get to that other capacity where you are able to operate efficiently of 2,200?
As soon as, of course, the impasse with the OEM CRRC is resolved, we will then have, in fact, we've gone and engaged and negotiated with them. We've got all that we require in terms of schedules to bring back these locomotives after fixing and supplying parts, finalized and signed off. We've even signed maintenance agreements with them, maintenance reliability agreements, and they are ready to now activate the return of the long-standing locomotives, which will really have an impact in the volumes that we move. However, the matters that are legal in nature remain between themselves and ourselves as a country, owing to matters relating to state capture. And for that reason, even those agreements that we've renegotiated remain frozen until those issues are dealt with. And that's why we are calling for all stakeholders to come to the party in assisting us and supporting in that conversation.
Is there appetite for private sector investment?
Of course, there's a lot of work that we do with private sector. The industry that you've touched on now, which is coal alone, has really come to the party. Remember, I mentioned earlier that we've reduced cable theft from 1,600 kilometers to 1,100 kilometers. Some of that, those wins are in partnership with private sector that has come in to support with some technology that is security related and some expertise in assisting us in fighting those battles. But equally, even in other areas, the manganese project that I've spoken about, the 1.5 million tons that we are realizing will be, of course, in partnership with the private sector that will then be able to support in beefing up our rolling stock that will be required to carry the additional tonnages. So across all industries, we continue to partner with private sector insofar as debottlenecking what appears to be challenges that are outside and beyond where Transnet sits now.
Yeah, there was a plan, if I remember well, to establish an infrastructure manager, I think by the end of October, to enable the private companies and operators to operate trains on these key freight tracks where they can facilitate that movement of key essential goods, whether it's cars, it's metals, it's coal, fuel to the ports, as well as automotive parts for imports. Is that still the plan?
Absolutely. As if you will recall, that was something that was pronounced to say the rail network itself will be now vertically separated to have an infrastructure manager that will primarily be focused on ensuring that the network required as a country and as an economy is up to standard, and therefore then allow operators to then run rail services in the network. So where the benefit comes in is we own as a country a network the world. And of course, Transnet Freight Rail alone operates a majority of that network, but cannot sustain maintaining the entire 28,000 kilometers and also utilizing fully the entire 28,000 kilometers. And for that reason, as we separate, have an infrastructure manager that will enable then areas such as branch lines that are ordinarily used for smaller, traffic and flows to also now be fully utilized by those that may have appetite, but equally those that will have the balance sheet and the funds to be able to maintain and bring back into operation those lines that we cannot at this stage operate.
All right, Bonginkosi Mabaso, thanks for making time for us. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at Transnet Freight Rail.